Hi everyone. So we're here with Peter Fox. We're on the second episode of the podcast, and he's a Laravel developer, a part-time freelancer, and he's going to give us a rundown of all of his freelance experience, things that have gone well, things that might not have gone too well, and hopefully we'll take some nice lessons away from it by the end of it. So can you take it away for us, Peter? Can you just tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Hi, thanks for having me, Ash. So, yeah, at the moment, I'm not technically freelancing all that much. When it comes to freelancing, I've had quite a varied history of in and out of employment jobs and freelancing and just generally all kinds of odd jobs. I'm always open to different opportunities. You probably know me best from being on X and posting quite often there, and at the moment kind of been focusing a lot on some open source work around Rector. So
that is a cool package, that as well.
It's been great to work with, actually. It's probably one of the, I think, because I've done open source kind of contributions before, but it's the first project where I'm like, it's actually really easy to work on tiny little things and get so much done in one evening that actually you feel like this is great and it's going to get merged in really easily, whereas there's so many ideas you can have and you try to contribute, and it's really hard, especially the worry of the rejection as well once you have put all that work in. But maybe I should have spoken to more people first.
No, I definitely get you on that one. It's there's nothing worse than spending a lot of time making a PR and you're like, yeah, it's definitely going to get merged, that, and then rejected, and you're like, oh well.
Yeah, you have to grow some thick skin for stuff like that, especially in the Laravel world. I appreciate all the work Taylor does, but sometimes you're a bit brutal when it's like a one-liner.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I wish I'd known a little bit more.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go off a little bit of a tangent as to what I was actually going to ask you first, because one of the things that I'm writing about in the new book I'm writing about freelancing is using open source contributions as a way of getting new work, because I feel like almost open source is like a really great portfolio for a web dev. It's literally, you're proving that you can write code that's can be approved by other people. So I just wondered, do you do open source that kind of reason as well, or do you just enjoy it, or is there any particular reasons?
I think my original thoughts was hopefully this will have some benefit. Not so much these days. I actually, if someone ever asked me should I get into open source, I generally recommend them the first thing they should actually start doing is writing articles, even if it's on a very basic Medium type blog, because I've had far more attention from people contacting me. Actually, one of my freelance gigs that was probably my best one I landed was from someone in the Netherlands just reading my articles and being like,
nice.
you explain this really well. I really needed help with this thing, and being able to see you communicate those ideas really easily. Can you come work for us? Yeah. And I think that's where I've actually seen more opportunity. More often than not, the people who are making those hiring decisions aren't necessarily in open source. So unless another developer has picked you up and seen you've done a lot of work, it's probably not going to be too helpful.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that one. If you're trying to get recruited by an in-house dev team or a creative agency or something like that, they've probably got the CTO or a lead dev or something, might be keeping an eye on that kind of Laravel news and that kind of thing, see what people are contributing to. But your local small business isn't trolling through GitHub checking PRs every weekend.
No,
so, exactly. So I just wanted to ask you then, how did you first get into freelancing? Was there anything that drove you to it? Did you just kind of fall into it or anything? Or
yeah, I think so. The first time I really gave it a go was actually at a period where I was finding a bit of burnout from employment. So at that point in time, I had, I would guess, around about four to maybe 5 years of experience under my belt. So I'd kind of done the junior, and at the time, I probably thought I was a senior more than looking back, there wasn't. But the kind of feeling was just I didn't really work like equally. Like, how long have you been in PHP for? I'm trying to
About 8, 9 years, something like that.
Yeah, so landscape was obviously quite different back then.
Yeah.
Laravel was trendy, and it was
Mhm.
definitely popular between developers, but not so much in businesses. And I'd done Code Igniter, I'd done a bit of Symfony. I'd got some quite good experience as well under my hat, but I really like working with Laravel, and there wasn't many Laravel jobs.
Yeah.
So actually, that was kind of an entry point, was to be like, well, if I can do more freelancey things, then hopefully I maybe have the choice of the stack.
Yeah, no, that's quite an interesting take. That I've not heard anyone come at it like that. So you literally did it so that you could almost choose the framework you want to work with because you couldn't do it in your full-time job.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's quite a cool little thing. That do you think based on that? I mean, I know that times change and stuff like that, but say we get some fancy new framework that comes up in the future, do you think you might do that again? Like, kind of take on some more work in a different framework just to try it out, or?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Trying to think related to the stuff I do now, probably like Laravel still. I think Laravel fits freelancing as well, really, just perfectly, because it's kind of that tool you can prototype in so easily. Whereas like I have some enjoyment of like writing Go, and I'd like to do more in that, but I don't see many opportunities, like small jobs coming up for writing things in Go and learning how to do that, maybe at the same scale I know how to do Laravel.
Yeah, it does seem like there's Laravel's just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, which is perfect for us, really, because it keeps the money coming in for us all and gives us lots of work to do. And I guess even if Laravel stopped existing like overnight, there'd still be all those applications that still need to be maintained out there. So, and it's fun to work with. So that's a
I will say, actually, just to tack on to that, part of the stuff I do with Rector now is something I am thinking like this is quite a useful thing in the future. Where I'm working now, I've had to learn to use Rector to solve a lot of legacy issues, and that has now kind of encouraged me to think, well, actually, maybe that might be something I enjoy doing for like on a more freelance type basis. Of if you've got difficulties upgrading, like hit me up and I'll start doing some Rector work for you. And
that's quite a cool thing, actually, because I've been recruited quite a few times. Well, recruited is probably not the right word, so I've been hired a few times to work on projects that needed updating from legacy things, stuff like that. I kind of wish I'd give Rector a try now, because I did it all by hand instead. But I really need to take a look at it. It's one of those things that's always on your list and just always gets pushed down. But yeah, it does seem like there'd be a nice little niche for doing that kind of work.
Yeah, like I'm not involved with Tomas, the creator of Rector, in his business side of it, but I think that's actually what his model is for the most part. That he builds all those tools because he does a lot of freelance work to upgrade projects, and therefore then he's also supplementing all the work he's doing with that income.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So I wonder if I could ask you about what's like your day-to-day like when you've got some freelance projects on. Would you say that your work week's any different to usual, or is your typical work day? Like, when are you doing the freelancing and stuff? Is it nights, weekends, during the day?
Yeah, if I can, I try to always fit these things into weeknights, because I think generally you have to compartmentalize that time if you're going to do anything part-time. So the last kind of gig I actually did was kind of more mentoring, but I always try to make sure that was done on a weeknight, because I just thought if I try to do it on a Saturday or Sunday, I need to rest. Having that time compartmentalized properly it's
Yeah, I definitely get you on that one. Like it's very easy to take on the extra work and say I'm going to do it the weekend, and then you kind of like the extra income at the end of every month, but you're constantly working all the time, and it catches up to you after a while, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've in one job. It wasn't technically a freelance job, but it was treated like a freelance job, and I did get to the point where I was doing literally every day to try and get a startup launched, and it was absolutely knackering to do that. I did that for a whole month, literally every day straight working, and never again. It paid off some credit card debt, but beyond that, would not recommend that at all.
Yeah, it can. I think sometimes your mental health it can really affect it, can't it? And like it just once you've hit that bottom, it's really hard to get back up then. And also, you fall out of love with programming as well and writing code. You kind of think, code, like you don't really want to carry on with it, or at least I don't when I get like that.
I think it's also if someone is wanting you to do that many hours and pushing you to get as much out of you as possible, then you've probably not got a good working relationship with that person to begin with. I can definitely state in that instance that it wasn't a good working relationship. It was I just need to get this done, and once it's finished, that's it. I'm out of here.
Yeah. Well, based on that, so you've had some kind of stressful projects you've worked on. Would you say of course, if you're not allowed to tell us, don't tell us. That's completely fine. But would you be able to tell us what you think the coolest project you've ever worked on is?
I don't know. It's really hard to differentiate even over all these years. Like, what was one that particularly stood out? I think the most fun I've had was I mentioned previously the guy from the Netherlands who hired me. That was a really interesting project because he was a CTO in this new startup. It was literally him, me, and essentially the founder. And me and the CTO worked every day together in the sense of like in the morning we'd jump on and we'd say, what are we doing today? And actually by the end of the day we'd gone from like a feature we wanted to implement to actually having it fully implemented.
That's quite cool, that.
Having that speed is really fun because there's no like waiting around. When you're in employment, there's obviously a lot of rules and stuff about getting everything out right, whereas it was a startup, we didn't care. It was about like what could we build that was going to add value.
Yeah, that sounds good. That like was that on like a sort of pair programming kind of thing, or was it just you just happened to be working at the same time?
It would be a mix of both. So we'd often start the day with just having a kind of little stand up together, and then I would focus on more the back end, and he would focus on the front end. So like then after that call, I'd go away and maybe get like a very basic endpoint working for something, and then I'd be telling him it's there, and maybe we'd kind of debug it through once he tried implementing the front end. Yeah. And kind of by the end of that day, we'd have spent enough time talking about it and debugging it that it would be working perfect.
That's sweet. That sounds like quite a nice little, quite a nice setup. That it's really nice when you find somebody that you can kind of like you complement each other's skills quite well. Like I love it when you can find someone who does the back end, someone who does like the DevOps, someone who does like the front end, and you all just kind of gel together and make this perfect little team. It's quite satisfying. Much better than like the internal politics, like you said, of bigger companies where it's got to go through so many stages to make a button. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's the big mistake in a lot of employment companies as well, is they should actually try to treat teams developing things as their own little mini startups themselves, and just trust like you've given the requirements as if you're a client, and trust that team has your, is going to treat you as the client and get it all done internally as best as possible, but still take in the feedback and iterate it really quickly rather than the slow process that often
Yeah, I completely
to these
agree on that
companies.
one. Like, especially like when you were saying earlier on about the fact that Laravel, you can build stuff so fast. Like sometimes, people are definitely going to disagree with me on this, but my opinion sometimes is you've got an idea for a feature, let's just MVP it, throw it out there, and then we'll iterate on it. Whereas sometimes it's going to go through a PM, and then it's going to go through UI UX designer, then it's going to go through a design on Figma, and then it's going to go through web development, then testing, then QA. And before you know it, like all your competitors have already built that feature 3 years ago, and you're left behind. But also, you could tick some boxes on like compliance and stuff. Like, whereas, like you say, you could have built the feature in a day or two, and then it won't be perfect, but at least you can iterate on it and get something really nice out quickly and perfect it later.
I've spoken publicly about feature flags and stuff a lot before, and that's absolutely a part of it. Is if you can isolate all those mechanisms you want to add, and you only expose like a few people to it, but you get that feedback really quickly, it's so much better.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you've got like most companies I've worked with, it'll probably be the same for you. They always seem to have like those clients that are very like pally with, like, and so they're saying, "Oh, we'll release this feature for them because they'll be able to give us some feedback, and they're not too bothered if we break anything just yet." Then after they're happy with it, then we can release it to everybody else after we've like kind of like perfected that feature we're building and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of mindset. It's people always talk about in startups that you should always kind of have that customer base already built in, because you then know that they want these things, and you get them on board first to help you actually iterate and find what the right flow is for that product.
Yeah, it works really well, that. So I'm going to move on a little bit. And do you have any horror stories at any times that you've worked with any clients where it's kind of been like
I can definitely think of coming back to that situation where I was working a month straight. So as I say, it wasn't technically a freelance because I was under payee, but as I say, it was treated very much as contract kind of work, and that was a bit of a nightmare because while I wasn't under contract, lots of other people had been hired under contract. And the absolute nightmare there was the CEO didn't really know what she wanted a lot of the times. She would completely fluctuate. She hadn't got any experience in developing a product. It was a nightmare, and she was essentially taking people on board a lot of the times and then telling them, like, after they'd done maybe 2 to 4 weeks worth of work, "Oh, actually, I'm not happy with you. I'm not going to pay you."
Not going to pay you?
Yes.
Whoa.
So it was a very toxic environment. As you can imagine, like, people would then contact me, and then they wouldn't have a go at me because they kind of just saw me as like the guy involved, and I'd be very much like, "I'm really sorry, this is not my involvement," but once you've dealt with that more than once in your life, like it's soul crushing. So I'm not surprised. That was quite horrible to deal with. I think that's always the worst fear of anyone going into freelancing is, can we build a trust relationship between us? Is this actually going to work? Because a lot of people do hire someone and they think, "Oh, this is going to be amazing," and then if it doesn't meet their expectations, they then start to get cold feet and want to pull out of it, not appreciating that software development didn't come out of existence for free. What we do doesn't necessarily, but it's a lot of hard work, and you got to get paid.
I mean, when I was talking to Simon Hamp earlier today, we were talking about like trying to like refine that skill of like noticing which potential clients are going to be the headache clients and stuff. And we were saying about how you get better at spotting the red flags earlier, like the more you've done it and stuff. But that is definitely one of my fears every single time I take on a new client. It's that kind of are we going to work well together? Like, you can usually tell pretty early on, but I have sometimes worked with people where you have got a few weeks down the line, you thought, oof, this isn't working great. And at that point, you've got to either have an awkward conversation with them and kind of straighten things out between you, or you've got to say, like, bye, I don't think this is for us. And yeah.
Totally. I think there's always that mindset you need to have that, be cautious in those how much time you're investing in a new client. If you can avoid having, if you're going to go full time, actually the best thing is to probably always have more than one client on the go. If you can,
definitely
flip between different ones, because the last thing you want is to have all your eggs in one basket. But yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess as well, when you end up only having one client, you're almost floating towards employment with extra steps at that stage, aren't you, as well?
Yeah. Absolutely. Which is, it's always my fear a little bit in doing these things. So that's the trade-offs often people don't think about too much. Is like you probably shouldn't just be courting one person paying your income.
Yeah. And plus, it keeps things nice and fun as well. If you're working on lots of different projects, like, you get a chance to, like, dabble in lots of different things that you might not get to do in, like, just one single project. So it's quite nice. I find it quite a good, like, learning experience, if anything, because the more people I get to work with, the more I get to see, like, how they'd approach this issue, approach this kind of problem, and it's quite. You almost learn from one project. It helps you with the next project stuff, so it's perfect anyway.
I do agree with that. I think if you are in employment for a long time, it can get very stale, and like that stack probably never changes, so you don't get to see anything different. And if you're not the top person in engineering, you're not necessarily making that decision either about what you get to work on and work with. I definitely can say that was one of the highlights, actually, of when I have done freelance jobs, is you get to kind of pick up very unusual skills potentially, and like, I get to work with this cloud platform that I never used previously, or just different techniques you get to apply.
Yeah, no, that's cool, that. So I'm going to ask you a bit of a weird question now, but bear with me, I promise it's going somewhere. So let's imagine that we've got a hypothetical time machine, and we're going to send Peter Fox back to the very, very, very first day you ever started freelancing. What is present day Peter Fox going to tell past Peter Fox? You get one piece of advice, not two, not three, just one, and then that's it, you brought back. What do you reckon you'd tell him?
I'll kind of tag onto the stuff I'm going to mention about getting paid right, and I think it sometimes take your ego out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
Back then, I thought I knew more than I did, and I think you can, like, going back to that whole, like, if someone turns around and says, "Oh, I'm not paying you what I agreed," as much as you kind of want to go down that rabbit hole of, I don't know if I can swear too much.
Honestly, it's fine. Do it.
But if you're going to start harassing the person who owes you money, you feel like that's your right to do it. And I'm not going to say don't, but equally, actually, sometimes the best thing is to try and negotiate it, because the worst thing you can do is try to, like, claim back through some kind of court situation. That's literally just eating up more of your time.
Yeah,
it's going to weigh on you every night, and you're going to be, laying in bed at midnight, kind of eyes open and raging against
it's a horrible
these people.
feeling as well.
You have to write things off as just that learning experience of, you need to pick the better ones next time. How did you find that client? Why was that maybe not the right thing? Mm-hmm. So it applies to employment as well. When you do interviews for jobs, you usually only get about 2 or 3 questions to ask the employer. And eventually you kind of, if you do enough of those interviews, you know how to whittle it down to what bullet is going to cut through the bullshit the most.
Yeah.
And you need to do the same really with your clients, because you don't want to be constantly going back and forth asking them like, can you will you do this, or what's your opinion on this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the main thing, is just like avoid your ego and just put past mistakes behind you and keep going forward as and write it off as a learning experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. I mean, I've got like a bit of an anecdote for those types of projects. Like in the past, when I was first starting, I was still in second, maybe third year of university or something like that, and I was starting to try and do a bit of freelancing on the side and stuff. So I was trying to build websites for small companies that were set up by like students and teachers at the university and stuff. They have like a little like a business hub where you can go to and like meet other people that are at the uni that are doing like projects and stuff. And I kept building, getting halfway through these websites, and the client, I just never hear back from them. I'd email them, I'd be like, right, okay, we're nearly ready. It's up on the staging site, ready for you. Like, do you want to check it out? And just wouldn't hear back. And I slowly started to realise over time that I wasn't charging enough, and also I wasn't asking for any money up front. So I was getting clients coming to me. I was starting to build the site. They get that initial rush, like, oh, I'm going to start a business, and then after that kind of initial sort of excitement's died off, and they're kind of like, oh, now I've got to start a business, they didn't want to talk to me anymore. So I started putting things in place, like taking deposits up front. So then when they did walk away, inevitably, I was kind of like, yeah, it's cool, I've already got some money out of it, didn't take me that long. Now I won't even touch anybody unless they're willing to pay me something up front, or if you can just tell sometimes, can't you, someone's going to be a good person, especially if they tend to have like a bit of clout on Twitter or anything like a reputation that they don't want to damage. And they're always the best people to work with. It's probably why they've got such a good reputation in the first place, to be fair. But there's certain people I've found through Twitter that have hired me, and they've been some of the best people to pay me ever. Paid me within minutes of sending the invoice, which is amazing. So
yeah, I think it's that whole authenticity type thing, isn't it? That equally they found you in a way where they know, well, this guy wouldn't talk about this, probably every day on a social media platform if he wasn't really invested. And equally, you kind of want that. You need to find that same thing back, where you're like, well, this person's really invested in making a good product and not making a quick buck. Because they're likely to step over everyone to get there.
Yeah. Well, no, I definitely agree. Like, because with things like social medias and stuff, you could easily, if you wanted to, grow your account up to like hundreds of thousands of followers and stuff like that. But people they can smell it from a mile away. They can just tell you're not authentic and stuff. And I tend to I want to build up my reputation slower but more authentic. And I want people to look at me and go, that's that Laravel guy kind of thing. And so because of that, I want to make sure I do good work, because if someone goes out and says, you're supposed to be that Laravel guy, but that project you built was a load of crap, so I want to make sure that I'm authentic. And like you just said, you can usually tell when someone else is already straight away. So I think it's just all about being nice with each other, really, isn't it? It's keeping the world turning round.
Yeah, I don't think you can. Well, you can fake niceness, but it doesn't last for long.
No.
It trips them up eventually. It's just, hopefully you've got the deposit first.
So, what do you have any plans for freelancing in the future? Like, do you see yourself going anywhere with it? Are you gonna give it up or grow it or anything? Or
I definitely know I will come back to it at some point.
Yeah,
it's just a case of when. So at the moment, I'm in the starting a family stage of life. So it's advantageous to be employed in that regard.
100%.
Not having to chase those things. Equally, there's probably a house upgrade sometime in the future, and I don't know if that's something you've ever had to deal with, but that's
Twice.
like last time. Yeah, last time I went into freelancing properly, it was I just got a house like 6 months earlier, so I wasn't too fussed. I was like, well, I'm not going to move anytime soon to care about, having
Yeah.
to deal with mortgage brokers and all that fun. So yeah, um, that's probably the bit that worries me most. It's a lot of extra paperwork. There's some great advantages. A lot of my computer setup came from obviously the fact that you can kind of start expensing a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's definitely a great advantage, because I think that's the one thing that's very. It's fine now because I work remote. I remember though it always felt like a waste, back when I used to work in an office, because I'd have to use like this really cruddy MacBook and like this awful screen that you could barely read off of, and you're like, well, I've got better equipment at home. I should be at home doing the work there. So that's the one great thing when you're freelancing, is you get to make the decision about all the equipment you use as well.
Yeah.
It becomes a value, not a burden.
I've got to ask you though, while we're talking about equipment, what we on? Mac, Windows, Linux?
Oh, absolutely. Mac now. I couldn't use anything else. I dabbled a long time ago with Linux and just found there wasn't really any advantage over Macs for Linux, because you get all that compatibility in a Mac anyway. If anything, I actually find it's easier more because someone's written up good installation instructions compared to Linux. And Windows is just painful, I think, for anything. Like, I know improvements have occurred, but they're so slow compared to making it work on Mac.
Yeah, I mean, I've not used Windows now for like probably about 5 or 6 years, so I can't comment on like its current state or anything, but I used to use Ubuntu most of the time. And to be fair, I did quite like it. It was quite nice, but I couldn't, there was like people would be saying like, oh, go and get SQL Ace or something, or go and get Table Plus, and it just doesn't exist.
I also, this is maybe a hot take question. As much as I love open source, and I work on open source code all the time, UIs that have been built by open source projects pretty much 99% of the time suck. And like Table Plus, probably not the best example actually, because Table Plus has its weird oddities, but it looks nice to use it. And if you're using tools every day that are really horrible to interact with and confusing and just aren't right, it does wear down on you. Like I remember making the jump from using, I want to say like NetBeans. I don't know if you even know what that is. For doing PHP to PHP Storm.
Yeah.
And
but it was night and day,
before that, I would have been told, like, I would have just said, oh, do I really want to pay that much money every year just for something I can get for free? And once you use it, you're like, no, this is it's less than 1 hour probably, well, less like a couple hours anyway of development, and it saves me hours upon hours upon hours. Like, you have to invest in yourself if you really love doing all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I completely get where you're coming from with that. I've tried VS Code in the past and all those kinds of things, and I mean, it looks nice, but everyone's like, oh yeah, so you can get it working really nice at Laravel if you just download this extension and this extension, and I'm like, no, just open PHP Storm and it just works. I mean, maybe that will change with this new Laravel plugin add-on. I'm not too sure what they refer to as an extension for VS Code, but PHP Storm, it's kind of, it's one of those things I just can't imagine not using.
I'd give it a go, but exactly in that mindset. I work currently somewhere where it's about a 50-50 split of some people using VS Code and some people using PHP Storm, and I'm just like, I don't get the appeal of the VS Storm at this point.
No. I've heard like simplicity is like one of the selling points of it, but to be honest with you, I don't find PHP Storm cluttered. I know some people do, but I quite like it the way it like just ships as default.
Don't get me wrong, I probably don't use... There's so much stuff in PHP Storm and I actually don't use it because I'm very much in that mindset of I'd rather have like a separate tool for Get, a separate tool for the database. I don't necessarily want to use all the clever stuff that's built into PHP Storm.
Yeah.
So I can kind of get where they're coming from, but equally, like, it's still PHP Storm. You can like cut it down if you really wanted to, but it's more having all of the intelligent systems in it and a lot of the. I'm assuming you have the Laravel idea plugin as well.
Yeah. I actually wrote an article for that last week, maybe a week before.
Actually, now you say it, I actually remember seeing that. Yeah, it's again like one of those things where the expense of it is so tiny when you compare to how much time it will save you, like fluttering back and forth between files.
Yeah, I think Laravel idea cost me about £2 a month or something. I could probably find that change on the floor just walking to the shop or something, so I can't really complain.
Yeah. We live in a good time, I think, for Laravel and tooling. It's
definitely,
pretty decent.
Definitely. So I just want to say anyway, like, huge thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you giving your time up. For anyone who's watching, they don't know it's quite late at night right now. So, so thank you, Pete. I just want to know, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you if they want to come and find you online on socials or anything?
I think the best place you're going to find me is just on X. I'm usually talking about any cool Rector stuff I'm playing around with at the moment. If not, on GitHub. What my X is, cringily, Sly Firefox is the handle.
Nothing cringe about that, don't worry.
It was an old one made while I was still at university. I'm dying for Elon to just release all of the old ones because there's literally a Peter Fox tag.
You'll be snapping that right up.
It's never been used, the account. I think the account was like created in 2008 and there's like one tweet on it.
Oh, wow.
Like, well, why is that still there? I just want the tag. I'll pay good money for it. But yeah, otherwise, Peter Fox on GitHub, I think, and you'll find all the other links there.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thank you again for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This is first kind of interview I've done, and it's been really good fun. Love
Hopefully
chatting.
The first of many.
Yeah, hopefully.